Hello, public opinion aficionados, and welcome to the Rasmussen Reports channel, where we give you unbiased election predictions because we aren't captured by leftist dark money pools, campaign consulting gigs, or corporate media overlords. And today we have something really exciting for you. Our latest 2024 rematch numbers between former President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden. And make sure you stick around to the end to see a chart that you won't be able to see anywhere else. It's 10 years of all of our Donald Trump presidential polling. But here are the results. If the 2024 presidential election were between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump, who would you vote for? 41% of U.S. likely voters say Joe Biden, but 49% say Trump, giving Trump a really comfortable 8-point lead. 8% say some other candidate, and 3% say not sure. Now, I'll just point out that this was a two-way head-to-head matchup, which we usually do to keep our numbers apples to apples. But we also asked a three-way and a multi-way candidate matchup, which I'll talk about later. And as you'll also see later in this video, where we get into the Biden-Trump rematch numbers, Trump has won almost every time that we've asked this question. But there were two times when Biden was just slightly ahead of Trump, and one in the fall in November where he was actually leading by 5. But every time since then, Trump has led comfortably in a 6 to a 10-point range. And in all of the polling in just this year, Trump has led by 8 points, 6 points, 8 points, and now again today, 8 points. So that's over 4,000 U.S. likely voters that have told us that the Trump to Biden range, the lead is about 8 points pretty comfortably right now. Now we're going to get into the demographics, and I'm going to look at party, age, and race. And there's some really bad news in each one of those slides for Biden. And first up are the party numbers. And what I see here is a really strong crossover advantage for Trump, one of the strongest he's had in our polling. 83% of Republicans say that they would vote for Donald Trump. But as of this point, only 74% of Democrats say they would vote Joe Biden. And that gives Trump a really stunning 9% crossover advantage. But look at that independent row. Donald Trump is now leading 11 points among independents. Now, we've asked this matchup quite a few times, and that's not his biggest lead. I think back in the fall of 2021, he almost led by 20 points among independents. I don't expect that kind of lead to hold up, but at this point in the cycle, 11 points is pretty stunning. And if that even comes close to holding, that's a really good sign that Donald Trump's going to win. But on to the age numbers. And look at that 18 to 39-year-old row. I think it's pretty commonly accepted that Democrats tend to lead amongst the younger voters. But right now, Joe Biden is only winning by 1 point. Now, they are more likely to say that they're going to vote for other candidates, and obviously some of those people will pick one or the other. But based on what you hear, wouldn't you have expected that number to be higher for Biden amongst 18 to 39-year-olds? Trump is absolutely crushing it amongst middle-aged voters, and it's a wash amongst 65 and older. Increasingly, that group, which would have previously been viewed as more conservative, to me contains more people that we would call elite or people with luxury beliefs, or perhaps people who consume more mainstream and cable news. But last, we have race numbers, and these are absolutely just cataclysmal for the Democrats. Now, Trump is leading by 7 points among white voters, which is no surprise. But look at that black row. Right now, Trump is only down by 9 points. Now, the black portion of the voting population is only about 12%. So this is a smaller subsample, and we would expect these numbers to swing around quite a bit. But I can tell you from our previous polling that Trump has been behind a pretty similarly small amount. If this also holds up going into the fall, I don't know how the Democrats are going to pull it out, especially with how those Hispanic and other race numbers look. Right now, Donald Trump is leading by 20 points among Hispanic and other race voters, and that's the biggest lead we've ever seen. But let's talk about those numbers a little deeper. Usually we lump Hispanic and other race voters together because, again, the subsample isn't that large. But just for today in these numbers, I decided to separate it out. And believe it or not, we actually have numbers from the past in a poll that we did in May of 2022 that shows the numbers for the dedicated Hispanic voting population. And here they are. And these numbers are crazy. So the first number, 2020, is who Hispanic voters in May of 2022 said they voted for in the 2020 election. The 2022 number is who they say they would vote for if the election were that day. And then 2024 is from today's polling. Biden has gone from 52% to 42% to now just 37% of the Hispanic likely voter population. Trump has gone from 37% all of the way up to 48%. I really can't emphasize how incredible this point is. It should be all over the news because up until recently, the mainstream Democrat dogma was that there was a new emerging Democrat majority coming from the increased population of Hispanic voters in America. And in just 4 years, Joe Biden went from leading by 15 points over Donald Trump to now losing by 11, a 26-point swing, again, in just 4 years. As I talked about before, we did a three-way matchup, and here it is with RFK in the race. Biden now only has 38 points. Trump has 44 points, still a 6-point lead, but Kennedy has 10 points. That's actually down from 12 points that he had in December. I hear a lot that Kennedy is really hurting Biden most, but in our numbers, that just really isn't holding up. Kennedy took 8 points from Biden and Trump, but he only took 3 points from Joe Biden and a little under 5 points from Donald Trump. He took everyone else from the some other candidate response. But I also thought it would be interesting to get into the motivation of why people are picking their candidate of choice and choosing which presidential candidate to support, which is the most important factor in determining your vote. 10% said the candidate's party. 46% said the candidate's policies. 32% said it was because they thought the candidate was going to save the country. And only 7% said it was because they just hated the opposing candidate. But wouldn't it be interesting to see those numbers by who people picked as their candidate? Here they are. Let's take a look at Biden supporters first. 17% of Biden supporters are voting blue no matter who. 50% are voting for him because of his policies. Only 19% are voting for him because they think that Joe Biden is going to save the country, though perhaps that's the kind of result you'd expect since he's an incumbent. But 11% of them actually say they're voting for Biden because they hate the opposing candidate, which ostensibly, in this case, is Donald Trump. But look at Trump supporters. Only 6% of Trump supporters say it's because he's a Republican. And based on our other polling, I think it's fair to say that he doesn't get much of a brand advantage from Republicans. 43% say it's because Donald Trump's policies, which I think is pretty respectable. But a whopping 45% of people who say they're going to vote for Donald Trump say they're doing it to save the country. Only 3% say they're doing it because they hate the other candidate, presumably Joe Biden. RFK numbers are similar to Trump's, but a smaller portion say that they're voting for him to save the country. Now, if you don't count his earlier dalliances with politics, Donald Trump has been on a national political stage for almost a decade now, and we've been polling about him. What I'm about to show you is the historical results, and we'll look at the 2016 election first, then the 2020 election, and now 2024, and then put it all together. We've had over 93,000 data points from voters on who they said they'd vote for in the upcoming election. And here's the Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton chart. And although this was the election where we picked up our favorite corporate media moniker of being a right-wing pollster, I think it's pretty fair to say that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were neck and neck most of 2016, and our polling shows that. There were a lot of really weird things that happened in that election with, email dumps and the FBI getting involved and a whole lot of October surprises. But look at Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton's numbers swinging back and forth, and Hillary Clinton edging out Donald Trump at the end with the highest numbers she's ever pulled in our poll. And we were pretty accurate. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by a few points, and Donald Trump didn't, but he won the electoral vote. But let's take a look at Trump v. Biden round one. And on this chart, you'll see we had a lot less early polling. Trump was an incumbent, so we weren't polling throughout the primary season. And Joe Biden became the candidate relatively late. So there wasn't this back and forth between the two candidates. But looking at the numbers, Joe Biden always had a pretty stable and comfortable lead over Donald Trump, except for a little bit at the end of the summer. And if you look at our final call there, you can see the numbers are fluctuating back and forth, and we wound up a little closer than the actual results were. But if you look at our entire election season polling and draw a trend line, I think you'll see that we were also pretty spot on in 2020, even though it was a really tough election to predict with all of the mail-in ballots and the stuff going on with COVID and all the other stuff too. But here we are in round two. And this time you'll notice something different. There are a few instances where Biden clawed out a lead over Trump, but his numbers now, on average, are higher than Biden. And his recent numbers put Trump really far ahead in a very statistically significant way. But here it all is together. And there's something that I'd like to point out here. Look at that red line starting off in the lower left and finishing off in the upper right. Donald Trump has consistently been clawing more and more support from the U.S. electorate. And Joe Biden is structurally polling significantly worse than he was just 4 years ago. Just take a squint at those two blue lines. He's dropped from the upper 40s to the lower 40s. It looks like roughly a 7-point drop, and Trump's picked up a few points of support. So Donald Trump is doing about 10 points better than he was doing at this point in the last presidential cycle. And if you compare these latest numbers with the Trump versus Clinton numbers, understanding that Trump won the Electoral College in that election, I think it's even more clear that, at least at this point, Trump is marching towards a victory. If you love unbiased public opinion reporting and numbers, please follow us at Twitter on Rasmussen_poll. Please subscribe on YouTube or Rumble. It's free and it really helps us out. Like the video while you're at it so more people get to see these numbers. And thanks for watching.